30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Z-Bot here with you on the smoke break Wednesday night. I know yesterday was 420, but today is the day that's really all about the smoke. And the only smoke you should be consuming is the smoke break. We're live with you Wednesday night on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel. 1 week, 1 day away from the NFL draft. It's here, folks. We've been waiting a long time. But the offseason has grooved along, and we are just a short week away from the NFL offseason. Super, super excited for this show as I turn the strobe off. We can only party so much. Super excited for tonight's show because I have a guest on who is maskless, or faceless rather, but we all know who he is. And you know exactly who I'm talking about. It is my man, Bruce Nolan. Bruce exclusive from the Buffalo Rumblings. Bruce, welcome to the smoke break, my friend.
Dude, thanks for having me. I feel like I should be using the word groovy a lot based on the intro and the strobe. Yeah, I feel like it's a really good thing that yesterday was 420, because if today was 420, you might have some viewers who had some different thoughts, might be tripping out a little bit with your strobe introduction.
You know what, Bruce? Everybody on this show, and I mean, I guess understandably so because of the name. I did it to myself. Once a week, there's multiple comments where somebody will say, "Oh, my man, he's lit. Z-Bot, he's on one right now." And I'm here to say, I don't partake in those activities. So as much as I think everybody out there wants to think I'm on here, I am having a good time, but not in that way. And of course, that's why I have to follow up those who partake in that day yesterday into today with something equally as exciting. So you got to hit him with the strobe, got to get you on the show and just load it up.
I understand you don't partake, but in the wise words of Matthew McConaughey, be a lot cooler if you did. So, I mean, doing the smoke break while under the influence feels like a natural extension of what this show's all about. And what we're all about is Bills Mafia, which is just having a good time, man. We're the people who throw ourselves through tables. So that seems like a logical extension of our normal behavior anyway.
I think you're spot on, but the difference between the elixir that we ingest to jump through the table and the other one that we're talking about right now, of course, is that I think that instead of jumping through the table, if we were just smoking pot, we'd line the table up with pizza and wings, and we just gather around like just in a community style and just pound food before the game starts. That's what I'd want to do, at least.
Which to me is actually probably safer than the jumping through tables activities anyway. So in the wise words of many of my friends who do partake in that activity, it's safer than drinking. So you know what? If I just got to eat some more wings, what's the worst case scenario? I end up with some heartburn the next day, feel a little bit of indigestion, got to take some Pepto-Bismol. I'll take it over the Natty Light excuses that we give the next day. Man, my head, my back, everything hurts. Yeah, no, I think maybe there's a new trend for Buffalo Bills. Instead of shotgunning a beer and jumping through a table, maybe it's just, have a little puff and eat some wings.
Well, on that topic, it's legal now in New York. So I am anticipating when we're all back in the lots, we're going to be seeing a hell of a lot more of that activity. And perhaps, who knows, maybe we trade in the table breaking for something more similar to that type of lifestyle. I hope not. I certainly hope not. But I know how the tailgates go out at One Bills Drive. Believe me, I partake in them weekly. But I am fully anticipating we're going to be seeing a lot more of that outside of the stadium. And rightfully so. Everybody's already in a good mood. Might as well elevate it, get in there, and set the high mark, should I say, Bruce. Really elevate that high mark.
Instead of bringing the tables, they'll bring recliners in the back of their pickup trucks and then put their recliners down in the parking lot and just sit there and just kind of lay back. And as you walk by down the aisle, you'll walk by and go, hey, man. Hey, man. Hey, how you doing? Go Bills, man. It's just going to be great.
And you know, the game kicked off 4 hours ago. We just won by 30. Oh, yeah. I got my wings, man. Go Bills. I love it. All right. Hey, Bruce, I could sit here and talk about partying in the lots at One Bills Drive with you all day, but we got some business to get to. And that, of course, is the NFL draft. We are 1 week and 1 day away. And I feel like we've been talking about it nonstop. Of course, as always, it dominates the entire offseason headline. And, you know, if you're a huge football fan, 9 times out of 10, you're going to wind up focusing your energy on off-season stories more than you are other sports. That's just what the NFL does. It's dominant. And the NFL draft doesn't get bigger than that. And we're 1 week, 1 day away. And the big question right now, of course, it's what are the Bills going to do at pick 30? And Bruce, I look at this pick as a very unique one because it's the farthest down the board the Bills have been drafting in my life. So it's a situation that I and a lot of Bills Mafia, probably most all of it, not accustomed to. And we're going to be waiting a long, long time next Thursday night until pick 30, especially since we know in the first round, each team usually, they drain that clock. I loved your tweet, by the way, the other day. Urban Meyer set in the tone based on how long he takes to get Trevor Lawrence. But you know he's milking it down to 0. You know that's just the way it goes. That's the first round. So Bills
immediately should be fired. 100% should be fired. Terminated on the spot.
Well, we do know the NFL was ruling on a lot of those new rules today. They were discussing it. That could be one that you could propose, Bruce. If you are on the clock for 6 months and you drain the whole thing, entire organization, it's sold. Sell it to London or something like that. You know, start getting the overseas teams in. They want to do that. That could be a good way to implement. But nonetheless,
I'm going to write a strongly worded letter. Z-Bot. It's going to be such a strongly worded letter that they're going to implement that. My penmanship skills will be put to the test. There will be many, many leather-bound books that will be necessary to interpret the vernacular in my letter. And it's going to be legendary. And it's going to convince the NFL that if Urban Meyer actually takes this all the way down and doesn't pick Trevor Lawrence in the first 30 seconds, just fire him immediately.
What I'd love is if, and you'd never see it, but what a tone setter. He's never been an NFL coach. What if he comes in and they don't even start the clock? Goodell just walks out. There's no intro. He just takes Trevor Lawrence. You can't kick it off any better, especially since last year we were deprived of the in-person draft. I mean, that would be awesome. Plus, I'm going to it. I'm going to the draft. So I don't want to stand around, you know, just hanging out, waiting around. I want to see it happen. So I like the standard you're setting. That could be an interesting rule implemented down the line. But Bills, pick 30, Bruce, and it's all we've been talking about. It's all we've been thinking about. And now it's almost here. Well, a week and a day away, but it's going to feel like 3 more days when Thursday rolls around. But when we do get to that pick, Bruce, of course, I have to start off here. You do a lot of work yourself. You were just telling me off air. You're going on 30 drafts where you are dissecting and analyzing where the Bills are going to go. In the 2021 draft, Bruce, where do you see the Bills going, and where do you think they should go?
I think that the comments from Brandon Beane oftentimes don't necessarily have something that you can dig your teeth into as far as meaningful comments, because if you think about it, Brandon Beane told us that he was cool making a pick at 30. He was cool trading up. He was cool trading back. And you're like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Thanks, Brandon Beane. And you can't really expect there to be any sort of significant hand tipping involved at a pre-draft, what previously was a pre-draft luncheon. Now it's a pre-draft Zoom meeting. But the one thing that I thought was interesting is he says, I'm probably looking more long-term than short-term at pick 30. And I think that's probably the only thing that you can take away from his comments about, hey, what kind of position? Because there's other things that he mentioned as far as medical that can help you kind of rule out certain players perhaps. But when it comes to position, you think, okay, long-term versus short-term. Okay, that has a tendency to kind of maybe push the idea of a running back a little bit farther out of the realm of possibility. But because they have multiple running backs under contract for multiple more years. But if you look at positions like wide receiver, positions like edge, positions like cornerback, there are currently two corners on this roster who are under contract in 2022. Two. Tre'Davious White, Dane Jackson. That's it. So that's a pretty significant need. Even if you don't think CB2 is a huge need right now, which I do, but if you don't, let's just put that aside for a brief second and say, okay, maybe you don't think it's a significant need this year. It's still a numbers need next year. You don't have enough bodies. When you look at edge rushers, the exact same thing occurs with edge rushers. Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison are both scheduled to not be on this roster in 2022. People sometimes forget that as part of the Mario Addison restructure, it wasn't just a pay cut, it was a Tyler Kroft cut. And by that, I mean, it also voided one of the years on Mario Addison's deal, which means he's not currently scheduled to be under contract in 2022. So your edge rushers that are currently under contract for 2022 for your Buffalo Bills are A.J. Epinesa and Bam Johnson. Okay, so right away, those things stick out to me as far as when he says, Brandon Beane says, I'm looking more long-term than short-term. But then there's also a sneakiness when it comes to wide receiver.
Yes.
Emmanuel Sanders is 34 years old on a one-year contract. Cole Beasley is going to be 33 and coming off a broken leg. So this is a team that runs a lot of 11 personnel and a lot of 10 personnel relative to the rest of the league. You need bodies at wide receiver. So for me, when it comes to talking about the comments that Brandon Beane made and what, if anything, you can actually glean from them, those three positions stick out to me as being positions where if you pick them at 30, you would be picking them for not just a short-term need, but also a long-term need.
Love. I was gonna wait a little bit on this, but you really got into it, and I like where your head's at because me and Rico sat down with Joe from the Draft Network a couple weeks ago, and he's terrific. And he knows everything there is to know about the draft inside and out. It's honestly miraculous. And his pick, Joe Marino's pick at 30, that he thought would be a real dark horse pick that no one's talking about, was the wide receiver position. And when he said that, it occurred to me that I hadn't thought about that at all. It did not come up in my brain once, because when you look at the Bills, what's the position that they are loaded at currently? It is the wide receiver position, and they are unarguably have a top unit in the league. But as he was laying it out and walking me through the advantage of taking a wide receiver at 30, it made sense, because what have we seen from Josh Allen? His success is predicated on the weapons surrounding him. And the reason he got better each year is because each year he had more to work with. A few years down the line, who knows what the wide receiver room winds up looking like. Inevitably, you're going to lose Cole Beasley. You're going to lose Emmanuel Sanders. It can't just be Diggs, right? And of course, we're hoping for Gabriel Davis to continue to emerge. But it is a position that you look at 30, and it might not be the first thing that pops in your head like it did with me. It didn't. But it makes a lot of sense when you're talking about the future. Then when you map it up with what Brandon Beane said and kind of where his head's at, it does make a lot of sense. But when I look at this draft, Bruce, it just seems to me that the safe and inevitable bet here is that Brandon Beane winds up going defense regardless of position. But you pointed it out. The two positions that I think are the most necessary are the corner and the edge position. I think overall the edge position is the biggest need for the Buffalo Bills. So that's where I'm hoping that they go at the 30th pick. Now, when Brandon Beane was talking yesterday, he basically told Bills Mafia that the reason this draft is going to be different than others is because of the work that they've already put in the offseason. All of Bills Mafia felt as though the offseason could not have been executed better by Brandon Beane. And he himself said it's not fun going into the draft when you don't have proper replacements for guys that you've lost. They really lost nobody. They brought back everybody that you could possibly think of outside of John Brown, right? That's going to be a key factor. So it leads me to believe that Beane is going to steer towards whoever winds up being the best player available. It seems like he's got that ability to be a little loose here because of what the loose ends that he tied up in the offseason. I don't know if there's a set guy going into this draft that they're locked in on, but he also has that element of surprise about him. That's what you were referring to. You can never really dissect anything from what Bean is saying. But from what I can infer, and based on what the Bills' biggest need is, which is on the defensive side of the ball, I see them going that route. I think they should go that route. But the more we talk about the future and the more we look at how much offense surrounds this team and its success, it does make sense if the Bills were to decide to go towards a weapon style position in the first round.
Yeah, I think that when you look at Brandon Bean, one of the things I've always appreciated about him is that his communication skills are good enough that he can not lie to you and also not tell you anything.
Right.
It's a little bit like how you practice with your spouse to make sure that you're always being truthful, but not necessarily volunteering any additional information that's not necessary. It's a little bit like being on trial or having a life insurance exam. When they ask you a question, you answer directly that question exactly with those terms that are necessary to only reveal exactly what you want to reveal and nothing more. And so when Brandon Bean talks, it's not like he openly lies to us by any means,
Sure.
But there's very little opportunity for you to say, okay, he's definitely going to do this. Now, to be fair, every GM does that, but other GMs do it by just blatantly lying. Brandon Bean doesn't do it by blatantly lying because his communication skills are good enough that he doesn't actually have to lie to you to not tell you anything. He can just talk you in circles all day. So eventually he said, well, we'd be okay trading up. I wouldn't love trading up because it takes assets. We'd be okay trading down, but if a good player's there, we're not going to trade down. And you're like, okay, so you just told me that you were going to, but you're not. And then you're going to trade down, but you're not. And then you're going to pick somebody, but you're open to other things. So you told me nothing. You just spent 5 minutes telling me nothing. And so I do think that there's an opportunity here for us to occasionally get something from him, but it's so, so rare. But I think a lot of what mattered to me from the press conference was Brandon Bean talking about what it takes to beat the Chiefs and talking about how the San Francisco 49ers game mattered and being able to have defensive weapons. And when you think defensive weapon, the first thing comes to mind is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And if he were to somehow fall to 30, would the Bills find a way to take him? And then, of course, the discussion around Big Nickel yesterday during the press conference. And he said, well, Big Nickel's a role that people use, but it's not a position. Like that person's a safety or they're a linebacker or a corner. And that's where we play them first. But when it comes to plays like Jeremy Chin last year or players like Kyle Duggar, they look at them like safeties who happen to play this additional role. And so I think that was pretty illuminating. But when it comes to what am I going to do, I feel like they're probably going to go defense here because there are two very significant positions where is either a numbers issue or an age issue or both.
Right.
But if this there are scenarios when I've done a mock draft and there isn't an edge there I like.
Right.
And there are scenarios where there's not an edge and there's not a corner that I like. And if those cases, I'm like, well, I guess I'll take Elijah Moore now. So maybe he'll do the same. You never know.
When I go through my mock drafts, the edge rushers that usually wind up appearing towards that pick wind up being Joe Tryon or Jason Oweh. What are your thoughts there? Are those guys on your board? Or are those guys that you look at and say, maybe I'll address the corner instead or go somewhere else?
I would think about Jason Oweh for sure. I think Tryon for me is an interesting case because I like Tryon. I just like him better in a wider system. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean, I like him better in like a Jim Schwartzian wide 9 system, or I like him better as a 3-4 outside linebacker. I think that Joe Tryon is a player who does best when he has angle advantage from a wider set. I'm not saying he can't be a 4-3 defensive end. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I like him better in that scenario. So I think that Oweh is more of a projection for sure. But if you're going to take a toolsy player, the thing for Oweh that makes me kind of weird is, goodness gracious, would you rather have a toolsy Oweh at 30 or would you rather have a toolsy Janarius Robinson in the 3rd? So for me, I believe in tools when it comes to defensive ends. There's a discussion that's going to happen actually tomorrow on the Bruce Exclusive about if you're able to nail edge rushers, if you're able to nail them later in the draft, is there some sort of commonality? And one of the things you'll notice is that a lot of them are toolsy. There are people who people took swings on with length and burst and said, we can coach this guy up. And it's got to have the right athletic profile. So for Owe, if you want to take him at 30, you have to think that not only are his tools good, but his tools are markedly better than players like Janarius Robinson, who you can get on day 2. So I'm okay with Owe. I'm not thrilled about it. I'm like, yeah, okay, it's a projection. But quite frankly, look at Bean's history. Look at taking Josh Allen. Look at taking Tremaine Edmonds. Look at taking Ed Oliver. These guys are freaks. People don't realize how freaky these players are because only one of them has really scratched his ceiling yet, and that's Josh Allen. But Tremaine Edmonds is a freak. Ed Oliver is a freak. Josh Allen is a freak. These are freakity freak level athletes. So it wouldn't be uncommon for me for Brandon Beane to take Jason Owe at 30. It would fit the idea when it comes to the archetype that Brandon Beane picks. And I said it before, I said it last year. There's a level of arrogance with Brandon Beane's pickings, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm going to take a freak athlete. I trust my coaches to coach him up. And he mentioned that in his press conference. When you see someone, you go, hey, you look for explosiveness off the ball when it comes to edge rushers. And then we think, hey, look at that. You know, we can coach him up and we can make it work. And we believe in that. And then in the comment, someone's saying right now, freak athletes are good, but we also took Milano. Yeah, we took Milano in the 5th round. I'm talking about picking high. And he has a tendency to pick freakish athletes high. Zay Jones, I know he wasn't here for Zay Jones. That was Sean McDermott's pick. But Zay Jones was a freakish athlete. So there are this commonality when it comes to Brandon Beane's picks, you know, leaving out Zay Jones because he didn't make that pick. But there is a tendency to pick freakity freak athletes. So that would kind of fit with the mold. But my theory is you might be able to get a toolsy edge later too. So it's tricky for me. I can see Owe. I can see a corner, but you know, Eric Stokes might not be there. How do you feel about him versus the other corners in this class? Caleb Farley might be there, but after the discussion with medical that Brandon Beane had, maybe you don't want to take a shot on someone who had 2 back surgeries in the last year. So it's going to be fascinating, but specifically as it relates to Owe, I wouldn't be shocked. It would fit the idea because people with those traits aren't typically available at 30. The only reason they're available is because there's a lack of experience there.
And I found it interesting you brought up Tremaine Edmonds. People forget, even though he's going into, you know, the story surrounding him recently was picking up the 5th-year option. He's 22. People forget that. I mean, not only is he a freak athlete, he's still unbelievably young. And I, like you mentioned, you said it perfectly. The only one that has hit his ceiling, arguably, is Josh Allen. Tremaine Edmonds has not. And with that body type, he is an absolute freak. The ceiling is still high there. So you're right. The evidence is there in that department. The freakish athlete evidence is 100% there. Going to get to the linebacker position in regard to Tremaine Edmonds in just a second here. But got to give a shout out to my man, Thomas Burke. He comes in with the super chat, Bruce, and he says, 2 best voices in Bills Mafia, Golden Throats, let your pipes rip. Thomas, thanks, my man. That's high praise from Thomas Burke, and I'm honored to be put in your presence in that department, Bruce.
This is a fake voice, so I'm glad that you enjoy it because I created it just for you guys.
I can only imagine what goes into creating the fake voice, but I do love it. Your ability to remain anonymous, by the way, I wasn't going to get into it, but we're there. It's one of the coolest things. I absolutely love it. Nobody else pulls it off like you. It's amazing.
It's become kind of a shtick, but it actually is a relatively significant reason why I do it. Like, it's not just a shtick. It kind of became a shtick because I kind of had to turn it into, because people keep asking me, you know, how come Bruce doesn't show his face? So I kind of had to create some sort of funny backstory, like I'm on the run from the FBI. But in reality, I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want you to see me. I don't want my real life to cross over with this. That's why I use a pseudonym. That's why I use a fake name and I don't show my face. And I just don't want to do it. So the fact that I had to create, this isn't even what I really sound like. If you talk to me in real life, you wouldn't even know it was me. This isn't even my real voice.
I got to say, when you hopped on here earlier, I thought you were screwing with me, but then we kept going, and I'm like, oh, that's just what we're rolling with here. But it sounds great. I mean, if you'd have me fooled, I think you'd have anybody. You do have everybody fooled. If you were out hanging out, I don't think anybody'd be like, what's up with this guy's voice? Is something going on? But I was talking to somebody earlier because they were talking to me about having you on. I forget who it was, a buddy of mine or something, and I didn't even really know the backstory, but I was explaining to him how genius it is, because in the world of social media now, it's a cesspool. And when you can't avoid it no matter how hard you try. The best way to go about operating in that environment in a way that you're not going to get dragged down is exactly what you're doing. You are years ahead of your time, my friend. That's why when you said off air you didn't want to date yourself, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You are way ahead. You're light years ahead of everybody else when it comes to the social media department. You got it figured out. I'm
playing 4D chess, baby. Everybody else is playing checkers. They're all still trying to catch up with Bruce and his crazy like a fox.
Yeah,
sort of. It's right. If Bruce ever got canceled, Joe Miller says in the comments, he could come back as Ron Burgundy. Darn straight I could. I actually want to work on. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work on some specific impressions that allow me to like completely modify my voice. So that way, if anything ever happens to me, I can just circle back as like a completely different character.
What's the closest you've come to getting had?
At one point, I got on StreamYard, but I got on from my phone and the camera automatically turned on.
Yeah.
But I had it turned away from me when it happened. So it ended up catching like the side of like my nightstand for a brief second until I clapped it against the nightstand. And so it went black. So that was about as close as it got. Randy Hardman says I could just get a Bane voice modulator. I actually don't think I need one. I think I could just do a Bane impression.
Let's hear it.
All right, hold on. Let's see. Let's just do. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Perhaps she's wondering why you shoot a man before throwing him from a plane.
I don't know. That's a pretty. I don't know. I don't know how that came. Did that come out okay?
That was great. That was great. What's that one catchphrase? Or whatever. I don't even know how you did it. There's one catchphrase that I always hear from the movie, but that was spot on. That was spot on. And here's the key, right? And Joe Miller brought it up. Not that I know we're riffing here, but I love this. Is very, very interesting to me. What Joe brought up is for all we know, you could be like three other guys on Twitter boosting whatever. I mean, that's the 4D chess element of it. You could be like Kevin Durant of the Bills podcast world and just have like multiple accounts and you can do whatever you want. Essentially, that's what it all boils down to.
So I will confirm this. I have a lot of burners.
Good.
I will confirm that for you guys. I do have a lot of burners. I keep them spread out for risk management purposes. Yes. So I absolutely do have that. But the vast majority of the time when you see me tweeting, it is actually me. So I will tell you that I do actually do most of my own tweeting. So
I love that.
I will say that.
It could be Rico. Imagine. That's amazing. That is incredible. I hope Rico sees that. Imagine. I mean, I hop off this. Rico texts me, man, that was a great show. I really enjoyed you and Bruce, winky face. I really enjoyed tuning in. Although I will say, I got to ask about the burner accounts. Do you have certain burners that are meant for positive tweets and certain burners that are strictly meant for controversial, argumentative tweets?
Actually, I don't do any controversial, argumentative tweets.
Good. Stay out of it.
Yeah.
So do I stay out of it too.
All of my burners exist in a happy rainbow-filled butterfly universe where everything is sunshine, butterflies, and rainbows, and My Little Ponies are dancing, and Louis Armstrong is playing in the background. I see skies are blue, clouds are white. And it's one of those scenarios where everything's always just wonderful and happy all the time.
Terrific. I think that that's another key you've unlocked. If you want to be happy on Twitter, which is damn near impossible, create an alter ego burner accounts and just go on and go about life with rainbows and daisies and whatever. I might take a page out of your book, Bruce. I'm learning a lot here.
Liberal use of the block and mute button help a lot too.
That helps, and getting rid of the certain keywords. Like I noticed the other day, somebody was tweeting about Game of Thrones. I never got into Game of Thrones, and I remember there was a point in time where you couldn't go on Twitter without it was all it was. So it hasn't been relevant in a long time. But somebody tweeted something the other day, and it was about Game of Thrones. Every single comment said, you can't see this, you can't see. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Forgot that I muted it like 3 years ago. But that's when I realized, I'm like, you know what? They're on it. Like, I couldn't see a single tweet. Let's kind of delegate this back into the draft, because I want to get a firsthand account from you about what the Twitter storm will be like if the Bills go running back round 1, because I know you are a huge fan of that mindset.
Oh, huge fan. Anyone who knows me knows I've been planting my flag that definitely we should take a running back in the first round.
You already bought your Najee Harris jersey, I heard. You already pre-ordered it. Or
actually, I got the single digit version just in case this whole rule passed with the NFL, just to make sure I covered my bases. Perfect. I actually think it'll be okay. And I'll tell you the reason why I think it'll be okay. I posted on Twitter earlier today that if the Bills stay at 30 and make a pick right there, then based on how much they're paying that player on average annual value, that puts them in unique territory as far as the rankings for their position. So the average annual salary on the pick that the Bills are going to make at 30 is going to be roughly $2.99 million, which is really low. Yeah. Like really low. And I think that one of the arguments that a lot of people who are proponents of running backs in the first round have made this particular draft season is it's 30th, not third. And this is one of the ways in which they're right. They're right in the sense that if you draft a running back at 30 and you pay them $2.99 million average annual value, that's the 27th paid running back in the league. It's not like you drafted somebody and now they're a top 5 paid running back and now you're incredibly inefficient. Now, that is high relative to other positions. If you draft a quarterback at 30, that's 35th. If you draft a wide receiver at 30, that's 56th. If you draft a defensive end at 30, that's 56th. If you draft a corner, that's 60th in the NFL. So one of the things I think that running back at 30 gives you is it gives you this idea that's not quite as inefficient as taking it high. So I really think it'll be okay, to be honest, if the Bills take a running back at 30. Now, what I'm going to say, if it happens, is I do or do not like the player, because I have different opinions on Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams. So it'll be separate how I feel about the player versus how I feel about the value. And there is no scenario where I'm going to love the value. That's just not going to happen, because I've already spent a long time explaining why I don't think running back at 30 is a good value. Now, it's not as bad as taking it 3, and we just outlined one of the reasons why that is. Right. Saquon Barkley at 2 is, highway robbery for Saquon Barkley. Yeah. Not in the good way. No, so I know. For me, taking a running back at 30, I'm never going to love the value. I'm just not going to. But I actually think it'll be okay, all things considered, because I think all of us, even the people who are adamant anti-running back at 30 guys like myself, if they pick Travis Etienne at 30, I'll go, yeah, I don't think it's a great value, but I get it.
So Etienne is the guy for you out of all of them that would make you feel better about it.
I would like Etienne at 30 over Najee Harris or Javonte Williams. And I like Javonte Williams. He's my RB1. But if you have to pick one at 30, if you hold a gun to my head and say, Bruce, if you don't pick a running back at 30, I'm going to pull this trigger. The first thing I would say was, are we sure it's loaded? The second thing I would say would be Travis Etienne. Yeah. And the reason that is mostly because he at least gives you a skill set you don't currently have. So at least you're getting something different from Travis Etienne than you get from the vision and contact balance base that you get from Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. So for me, if you take Travis Etienne at 30, I'm not going to love the value. I'm just not going to. But I'm not going to throw a fit about it. I'm not going to go, I'm done with the team now. I'm done. I'm moving on. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go, listen, I don't think it's good value, but I get it. And I have a feeling that even the most anti-running back people will probably be on board with me.
See, it's funny. The reasons you were using to defend the pick, should it happen, were the exact same ones that I was using in my head, trying to come around to a conclusion of how I would feel if they went running back at 30. It's basically the exact same. The point you made was spot on. It's 30, not 3, right? 30 doesn't, it feels like one of those picks, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, where it's uncharted waters for us Bills fans. We're not used to picking this low. It is a pick where there's a luxury in the fact that you can kind of go anywhere with it because you're not risking an insane amount in draft value like the Giants did with Saquon Barkley. And that's another perfect example. I mean, you're right on wavelength with me here because I'm a huge Penn State football fan. Saquon Barkley by far is the best Penn Stater I've ever got to witness personally in the stadium in my life. The fact that the Giants went to for Saquon Barkley when that quarterback draft class was what it was, and now you are with Daniel Jones. It's just that's where the proof's in the pudding. And I think the days are done where we see running back go even close to a pick like that. Because anymore, it is common knowledge throughout the NFL that you simply do not need to do it. Teams are running through that position every 4 or 5 years. They're just cycling through. The problem with the Bills right now is throughout this cycle, they haven't had that one solidified guy that they look towards the future with and say, he's our guy for this certain period of time. The reason at 30 that I look at it and say I wouldn't be upset about it is because you're adding to a position that it seems to me definitely needs an upgrade. There are a lot of people out there who feel the position is adequate. Adequate in the sense that it's good enough, and I agree with that, but it clearly could be better. And I think if you use a first-round pick, the objective, of course, is to make that position better, and I think it ultimately would. I'm in agreement with you as well on ETN. I do like Najee Harris, but it seems like the skill set from ETN is just greater. He's giving you more out of the backfield, and he's more elusive. Najee Harris, bigger back. I look at him more as a brute style runner, but I mean, he was also a terrific running back in Alabama. You just never know how these things pan out. It'd be interesting to see out of those three, not only who goes first, but who winds up having the best career. I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers to wonder how the running back situation pans out. I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if they wound up going running back in the mid-20s there. That's clearly a position they literally could not run the ball at all last year. It was far worse than the Bills. There was no respect for the Pittsburgh Steelers run game. So I look at their pick to see how the rest of the dominoes fall at running back. But ultimately, I got to say, Bruce, I would be shocked. There was a point in time where I wouldn't be, but the more I thought about it, I would be shocked if the Bills did use that 30 pick on a running back. You would be shocked, correct?
I would be shocked. I think that Brandon Beane has always taken such a long-term view of the team and making sure that he's setting the team up for success. Taking a running back at 30 after you've invested 2 third-round picks in the position and you just had the most successful offense in the history of the franchise with those players last year feels a little bit like a luxury pick to me. It feels a little bit, you get a little cute. Yep. Like, hey, you made it to the AFC Championship and now you're going to get a little cute. And I don't think I've seen Brandon Beane get a little cute with any decisions that he's made. So I would be a little surprised.
Factor though, Bruce. Do you think it plays into that part where you said there's an arrogance, which I agree with you. There's this swagger, this arrogance about Brandon Beane in the draft. Could it not in a cute factor, but in an arrogant type way, could it speak to that element of Brandon Beane's draft style?
I think Brandon Beane has an arrogance about the organization and their ability to turn somebody into something good. And that's where the conversation about Jason Oweh came in. But this I don't think that would feel, I think Brandon Beane has been aggressive, right? He's traded up multiple times, but there's a line between aggressive and reckless. And there's a very important balance to be kind of figured out there between aggressive and reckless. And I think that this idea, when you have a team who has 2 very significant positions that revolve around stopping the pass, edge rusher and cornerback, because winning in the NFL is not about running and stopping the run. It's about passing and stopping the pass. And the Bills can pass, and the Bills want to stop the pass a little bit better. And both the positions that most correlate to you stopping the pass, edge rusher and corner, you have real significant issues at as far as numbers and age. So I think that those things staring you in the face, then drafting a running back, probably would feel a little cute to me.
I agree. And you and I are really smack dab on point with where we both think the team should go. It's edge and corner. And to me, I think it was just inevitable, and I've beat this dead horse a million times, but it was just inevitable that the lack of an edge rusher when we got to the AFC Championship was the Achilles heel for the Bills, and it was the reason the Tampa Bay Buccaneers destroyed the Kansas City Chiefs. Not just beat them, but absolutely pummeled them. It was a completely different game than 2 weeks prior against the Bills, and the main reason because of that was the Bucs' defensive line. Now, are you going to find that at 30? As we were talking about earlier, that's the tough thing. Could you find that value in a workable way in the third round, like you were suggesting? See, that's what it all comes down to. But that in itself is the draft, right? It's essentially a bunch of lottery tickets. The more picks you have, the more tickets you have, and the more of a chance you have to hit. But you got to take a chance at a position that you need help at. Edge, to me, seems like the most likely area that I could see the Bills going, and the biggest need for the Bills at this current time. Believe it or not, Bruce, the Bills aren't the only team drafted in this draft next week. There's plenty of other teams. There's 31 other teams.
No.
Next week. I thought I know you're the newscaster, Bruce exclusive, but I thought I'd break you the news. There's 31 other teams, and it's an interesting draft, Bruce. It really, really is, because at the top of the draft, it's solidified. We know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson. And at this point, there's essentially no argument against it. I think you have to bet $2,000 to win $100 on Trevor Lawrence and like $1,500 to win $100 on Zach Wilson to the Jets. Those are locked in. Where the draft to me really starts, Bruce, is pick 3 with the San Francisco 49ers, because it's the first pick in the draft where we don't exactly know who it's going to be. We know it's going to be quarterback. It's inevitable, obviously. Kyle Shanahan, aggressive and silent in a move that nobody really was expecting. They move all the way up to 3. Now it comes down to what most people are saying is going to be 2 quarterbacks, Mac Jones or Trey Lance. And it's crazy to me because throughout the entirety of the college football season, it was always Trevor Lawrence, and then whoever was second was getting Justin Fields. Now Justin Fields might be the 4th quarterback off the board. So let's talk a little bit about the other teams involved here, Bruce, especially towards the top, because it's a QB-heavy draft and one where we could see 4 quarterbacks go in the first 4 picks for the first time in NFL history. Let's start with the San Francisco 49ers. Which quarterback do you see them going with, and why?
I reserve the right to change my mind at least 15 times between now and the draft. In fact, I might change it 15 times between now and when I publish my 32-team 7-round mock draft that comes out on Buffalo Rumblings, I think on Wednesday. Yeah, I know. That's when you know you've gone too far. That's when you know that you've crossed over into a special level of dedication or obsession or whatever it is you want to call it. But so the thing for me right now is that I'm trying to piece together these statements and sources that you've gotten from the 49ers and leaks and trying to make them all fit. Yes. And say, okay, let's assume for a second that all of them are true, because sometimes we have a tendency to see discrepancies where there aren't any. Mm-hmm. And we do this a lot in life in general. What we do is we don't realize that multiple things can be true simultaneously because we don't have a broad enough view. So the statement that came out from a source a while ago after the trade up happened was Jimmy G's our guy this year. He's our guy this year. And everyone was like, yeah, right. Jimmy G's your guy this year. Okay, well, what if that's not a lie? What if Jimmy G actually is the guy this year? Okay. And you still take a quarterback. So if you want to take a quarterback and you know for a fact that Jimmy G is still going to be your guy, that's probably Trey Lance. And the other thing that I think is interesting to me is that Kyle Shanahan is notoriously transparent with the media. And that's one of the reasons why he's beloved by the media. And for me, I think that the interesting thing about Kyle Shanahan is what he said about Josh Allen and the quarterback position after Josh Allen lit him up in a primetime game. And he was talking about having a playmaker like that at quarterback and what that gives you. Mac Jones ain't it. Mac Jones can do things within structure. But as we saw from the Rams and Sean McVay, having a quarterback who can only succeed inside the structure that you provide him will only get you so far. Yep. At some point, you need the quarterback to be able to make a couple plays that nobody else can make. Sean McVay's sitting there pulling out his perfectly coiffed hair on the sidelines going, goodness gracious, do I have to spoon feed you everything, Jared Goff? And Jared Goff, on the other hand, is going, goodness gracious, I'm being micromanaged to death. And so for the two of them, they're like, you know what? Nope. This is not going to work anymore. I can scheme up the best, but at some point I need a quarterback who can make plays off schedule, right? I need a Patrick Mahomes. I need a Josh Allen. I need an Aaron Rodgers. I need a Dak Prescott. I need players who can make things happen if the play breaks down. And then there was a discussion going on today on social media about the play breaking down and players making plays off schedule. They say, well, what about the plays on schedule? Well, I mean, you don't want the quarterback to screw up just so he can make a play off schedule.
Yes.
Are we just going to assume that the defense never gets it right? Are we going to assume for a brief second that the defense never calls the right play to match up with your coverage? The offensive coordinator never makes a mistake, calls a man beater that doesn't have any zone beater concepts in it? That never happens? When those things happen, you need a quarterback who can do those things. And I think that's what Kyle Shanahan has seen. And when I see that stuff, Mac Jones is a perfectly reasonable quarterback within structure. I don't think he's a bad prospect, but I don't think he's the kind of player who Kyle Shanahan is looking at as the next wave of quarterback in the NFL.
Yep.
Who can make a play outside the construct that the play was designed. And he saw what Josh Allen can do when that happens. And he's been watching that from Russell Wilson in his own division twice a year. I think it's Trey Lance for all those reasons.
Loved the comparison between the 49ers and the Rams because there are a ton of similarities there. Two young up-and-coming coaches that, when it's all said and done, could wind up being two of the best of this era. Two teams who get to a Super Bowl and lose. Two teams who lose in the Super Bowl because of an adequate offense. Two teams who had a quarterback who were not nearly as athletic as the rest of the league. Two teams that have incredibly stout defenses, and two teams that are currently right now a Super Bowl contender if they get the quarterback in place. So that comparison is great. And I think that is the reason why Jimmy G inevitably is gone prior to the start of this season. I think that you have to say he's your guy because that's just the way the cards are dealt typically in this situation. Now, I do understand that Shanahan is more honest than most, and I have to tip my cap to him, but you cannot show your cards too much. Who knows what Jimmy G's value becomes once the draft is over and team X, Y, and Z doesn't wind up getting a guy at quarterback that they expected to. I mean, I didn't think Sam Darnold was going to get 3 picks, and I think Jimmy G, when healthy, is clearly the better quarterback compared to Sam Darnold. There's value there to a degree. The Mac Jones, the whole story is interesting to me because if the 49ers don't take Mac Jones, he probably falls out of the top 10. There's no other team that you hear clamoring for Mac Jones. It's only the 49ers. And in these situations, that's where you wonder if that's on purpose, if that's planted. Because I think that Trey Lance would be the pick that would shock most people when it's all said and done, because all you've heard is Mac Jones to the 49ers. Now, the reasoning I've been hearing throughout the last couple of days here is that according to, there was an article that had a bunch of anonymous sources that were scouting these quarterbacks and comparing them. And apparently Mac Jones is the quarterback out of the class that's most ready to win now. And Kyle Shanahan thinks that, he's ready to win now. He's got a Super Bowl team. If it weren't for last year and their injuries, I mean, they are one of the best teams in the NFC. I don't think you build your franchise around a quarterback that you bring in, however, to try and win within a couple year time frame. I mean, you want to draft a guy, especially at 3, especially when you trade 3 first rounders to get all the way up there. You're hoping you get 15 plus years out of the guy, not a few short years in a time window in which you think you can win. So I'm in agreement with you. Trey Lance just seems like the better choice. I mean, I hear a lot of similarities between him and Josh Allen in the fact that, the ceiling could be astronomical, but it could also be, a disaster. But with Mac Jones, I think what you see is what you get. You already know what you're going to get from Mac Jones, and I don't necessarily think that that's ever going to be elevated into a play style that is going to be consistent with where the league's going, like you mentioned. The pocket passer and the inability to create plays on your own, scramble, run. If you don't have that anymore, you are sorely lacking in this league. It's clear and obvious. And look at the two representatives in the AFC. It was the two best quarterbacks who can do that in the AFC. And the two guys representing in the NFC just happen to be two of the best to ever do it. And once those guys are gone, Brady and Rodgers, it's just going to be a whole lot of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And if you don't have that, good luck. So the whole concept around the 49ers is very interesting to me because I don't quite understand where their head is at, because we're not really getting any concrete ideas as to what, because I don't know if you're like me, Bruce, but every time I go on Twitter, every quarterback just so happens to be a perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's system, right? There's no quarterback that is. Everybody says that. So I don't know what works in San Fran in regard to the organization itself. But that's where I think the draft initially starts and gets interesting. The next pick, Bruce, Atlanta, is where it really, really begins, because that's the first pick in the draft where we don't know what the position is going to be. The first three are inevitably quarterback. Atlanta, I just don't see them going quarterback. They certainly could, but with Matt Ryan's contract, 3 years left and a huge cap hit if they dump him, I don't think it's logical. Still could happen, but it looks like that could be the first pick that winds up getting traded for a haul. There's potential there. What do you see Atlanta doing at 4 and why?
I think they stay and take Kyle Pitts.
Okay.
And the reason I think that they don't take a quarterback is exactly what you said. I do think that from a quarterback standpoint, they had an ability to not hitch their wagon to Matt Ryan. They didn't have to restructure that deal. The Atlanta Falcons had other contracts they could have restructured to obtain cap space aside from Matt Ryan's deal. They chose to do a simple restructure on Matt Ryan to purposely hitch their wagon to him for a longer amount of time. Like, they chose to do that. They didn't have to. And the fact that they chose to do it before the draft, it's not like they didn't get the guy they wanted, so they restructured it. That's not how it worked. It's not like they missed out on the dude they wanted, so they decided, I'm going to hitch my wagon to Matt Ryan. That's not how it was. Mm-hmm. And for them, they just invested a ton of resources into their offensive line over the last couple of years. And so I know that a lot of people think maybe Rashawn Slater, maybe Penei Sewell.
Yep.
For them, as Julio Jones starts to wind down a little bit, I think that they look for a secondary offensive weapon apart from Calvin Ridley to make sure that they can get things taken care of there. And I really think that Jonnu Smith was a fairly notable part of what the Tennessee Titans did on offense when Arthur Smith was there. And if you have someone like that who's just more talented than Jonnu Smith was, then I think that you can find an opportunity to do a little bit more 12 personnel with Julio and Hayden Hurst and Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts, and do play action and do all the Arthur Smith stuff, the stuff that made Ryan Tannehill so successful, which is the same stuff that you see from Shanahan and the same stuff you see from Sean McVay, which is 12 personnel, play action, intermediate routes, get some jet motion going, get some misdirection, hit the intermediate crossers, get your yards after catch. This is the kind of stuff that Arthur Smith does. So for me, I think Kyle Pitts is a perfectly reasonable pick there. And I think if they stick there, if you held a gun to my head, that's what I would say.
I have never seen a tight end prospect be elevated to the limelight like I have seen Kyle Pitts. Everybody is just under the impression that he is going to wind up being an all-time great. It's really miraculous. I mean, I have yet to hear a single bad thing about the guy. And as you know, when you have a tight end of that caliber, it takes your offense to a whole other level. That's the reason that the 49ers were in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. That's a big reason why the Chiefs have been right there the last 3 years. The tight end position is a rarity to find a guy like that, like Kittle, like Kelsey. if you do wind up getting it, it's a whole other level. I just wonder at 4, can you take Kyle Pitts if someone calls you up willing to give you an offer you simply cannot refuse? And I feel like there will be an offer on the table of that variety. There has to be a team that is willing to give up a fortune to go to 4. It just depends on who it is. So I wonder if Kyle Pitts winds up being worth taking over that, over a trade down that could wind up giving you a ton of draft stock and also stocking up on perhaps more weaponry like you were referring to with one of those top tier wide receivers. I think if they do wind up taking Kyle Pitts, Bruce, or another player, that tells me that the offer that they received just simply was not good enough or what they were expecting. But, at the same time, there are other teams within the top 10 that I think other organizations looking for a quarterback look at and say, maybe we don't have to go all the way up to 4. Maybe we can trade with, maybe we can trade with Detroit. I'm hearing Denver's willing to trade down because they don't really mind who they get at quarterback. It's just inevitable that they're going to go quarterback. They don't necessarily need to stay at 9. So maybe 4 is too much to ask and they don't wind up getting anything close to what they'd be willing to take. But I think the pick at 4 is super intriguing because it really is the first pick in the draft where we just have no idea what's going to happen. Now, the team that I'm focusing on the most, Bruce, right next to the Bills, it's New England. Far and away, it is New England going into this draft. New England is in an unprecedented position that at one point I thought we would never see. It just seems like no matter how any season played out, the lock of the year was going to be that New England was going to be picking in the late 20s, early 30s. No question. They're at pick 15, Bruce, with Cam Newton still at the helm. And it seems like as the organization itself, they have never been in a better position, nor do they think they will be in a better position in the years to come to get a potential franchise quarterback. This is a spot at 15 that Belichick and Kraft do not anticipate being in again, or at least don't want to come close to being into again. It's a prime opportunity to go get that quarterback, Bruce. Bill Belichick has never traded up into the top 10 in his career. What do you see New England doing heading into the draft?
15-7 with the Detroit Lions to take Justin Fields.
Okay. Why Justin Fields?
Well, I think that if you have an offense that you're building to take advantage of Cam Newton's strengths, then Justin Fields is going to be able to fit right in. Mm-hmm. In addition, we all talk about the benefit of having Trey Lance sit for a year. I think Justin Fields gets those same things behind Cam Newton.
Sure.
And Cam Newton's still on a 1-year deal. And like you said, Bill Belichick's not going to have an opportunity to get another guy here soon. So for me, if I had to put a bet on it right now, and of course, 90% of this stuff's going to be wrong. That's just the way it works in mock drafts, right? When it comes to predictions, all these people who are talking in the comments, 90% of you are going to be wrong too. Sure. I'm going to be wrong too. I'm going to be wrong a ton of times. So for me, it sounds a little bit like Patriots up to Detroit at 7 to take the 4th quarterback probably off the board, which I think is going to be Fields. Now, with Atlanta, the interesting thing I wanted to talk about with Atlanta, I think that Atlanta trading out would be a lot more opportunistic if Carolina wasn't the team who would want to come up. And I don't think Atlanta is going to let Carolina come up and get their quarterback. If there was a different team at 4, I would immediately project Carolina to go up to 4 because they have an extremely aggressive ownership who really, really wants the guy there. And they made it very clear that Bridgewater's not the guy. Then they got Sam Darnold. Now, of course, Darnold's probably going to be the guy this year. But if those things hadn't happened, I think the reason why Carolina ended up trading for Sam Darnold is because they knew they couldn't trade up with Atlanta because Atlanta wouldn't let them. So I think that you look at New England, maybe Washington, but Washington's at 19. If you're Atlanta, do you really want to trade all the way back to 19 and miss out on a ton of good prospects? Washington, in addition, they'd have to offer everything to go from 19 to 4 for a quarterback. I mean, literally all your picks to do that. So for me, when it looks like New England, I say, okay, 15-7 potentially for Justin Fields. And Atlanta, I mean, New England maybe 15-4, but I just don't see it. I think Atlanta would be willing to do it to go back to 8 if it wasn't Carolina. And that was Carolina's reason why they went and got Darnold.
I wonder if what the 49ers do dictates what New England does. I wonder if they skip out on Mac Jones, New England thinks he falls to him. I've seen in numerous mock drafts where if the 49ers skip out on Mac Jones, he does wind up falling into the mid-teens and New England would be there to get him. I do think, though, if you're New England, you've never been in this position under Bill Belichick and you're hoping to God you never get there again. Why not roll the dice and trade up and do something? I mean, because this is a new era in New England. Everybody keeps trying to say, well, Bill Belichick doesn't trade up. Yeah, well, Bill Belichick also doesn't spend $250 million on the first day of free agency. They just did, right? So the old trends of New England with Tom Brady are gone. It's a new generation in New England. I think they match that trend, Bruce. I really do. I'm in agreement with you. I think that they trade up because I just don't see them in their minds thinking they're going to have an opportunity like this again. You have to take full advantage.
I think that when you look at Bill Belichick's aggression this offseason, I don't see why you would be aggressive to make sure you got weapons for Cam Newton long-term on a 1-year deal. You're doing all this stuff for an end game. You're doing something with something in mind. And Cam Newton on a 1-year deal at his age cannot be your end game. It can't be. If it is, it's organizational malpractice.
100%, especially after what we just saw last season. And I think the main reason they brought him back is because of what he serves to the locker room and because they knew in their mind that they were going to try and get their franchise guy. And like you mentioned, have Cam Newton there in the locker room who they value in that realm to mentor the next coming Patriot great in their mind. That just seems inevitable. It just seems that if you are going to try and continue the Patriot success under the regime that had that success, you are going to have to veer away from everything they've done before. We've seen them do that already. So like you mentioned, nail on the head, why would you do all that to pump the brakes at the position that it matters the most? You don't go get 2 stud tight ends and multiple wide receivers so Cam Newton can under or overthrow him. You're exactly right. So for all those reasons, it seems like a foregone conclusion they go quarterback. The interesting element is how are they going to wind up going about getting it, and who is it going to be? I mean, this is big news for Bills fans. I mean, obviously we had the dud out of New England last year, and we enjoyed every second of it. But they're not looking to get complacent in that regard. They are not looking to dwell around 7-9 or what 7-10 would it be this coming year. We enjoyed that for a period because that was a lock, right? With all the opt-outs for New England last season, Cam Newton coming in and what we had seen, we knew that it was going to be a down year. But they're not looking to have many more down years, and it just seems like striking distance is right there for New England, Bruce. I got to tell you, right next to the Bills pick, the most excited element of the draft for me is seeing what New England winds up doing.
I would agree with that because we haven't seen Belichick successful absent Brady. That's one of the things that Boston fans who are anti-Belichick decided to jump on him about this year's all. What is his record with Brady and what is his record without Brady? And so I do think that there's an element of Belichick that wants to kind of prove that he can do that stuff as long as he has a decent quarterback, because quite frankly, any head coach's record without a good quarterback is bad. One of the things that was talked to me all the time about coming into this year is, hey, how do you feel about Sean McDermott? His record's okay. I said, listen, has he had 1 year of good quarterback play? Because Josh Allen, 2018, that was not good quarterback play. No. Josh Allen, 2019 was not good quarterback play. Josh Allen, 2020 was very good quarterback play. And you can't really say, well, you as a coach, your winning record sucks. You had Kyle Orton, but your record sucks. So sorry for you. You can't really evaluate a coach based on record if he doesn't have decent quarterback play. And Sean McDermott is a good coach. We got a chance to fully evaluate that because he got good quarterback play. Bill Belichick needs good quarterback play. And based on Cam Newton's contract, it's not like it's prohibitive for them to go get a rookie. So I'd be shocked if they didn't.
Spot on, Bruce. As we talk about the draft, it's a perfect time to talk about Manscaped, Bruce. I know you've heard of Manscaped, and they are the sponsor of the Smoke Break. And when we're talking about drafting in the NFL, there's a lot of uncertainties. But if you're drafting a men's grooming product, there is only one choice, and everybody would trade a fortune to get up to one and take it. And that, of course, is the lawnmower from Manscaped. This thing is a absolute beast. The battery lasts up to 90 minutes, so you can get a long shave in if you really got some business going on in and around your body. You got 90 full minutes to get it off of you. 70,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke. So if it's late at night and you really got to take care of it, you can do it in the middle of the night. Nobody's waking up, and you can take it into the shower, which is great because I would rather not do it in the living room, Bruce. I'd rather not whip out my Manscaped lawnmower in the living room, take it in the shower, nice and discreet. It's got waterproof technology, and it's got an LED light, which illuminates the grooming areas and maybe perhaps allows you to do it in the dark. I mean, you can go nuts with this thing. You can go absolutely nuts. You can take it in the water. You can do it in the dark, and you can do it in the middle of the night when everybody's dead asleep. It is the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0. Thing's a beast, and if you need an upgrade, which we all do, believe me, in the men's grooming department, the Manscaped 3.0 is for you. And you can take advantage of this program by getting it for 20% off with the code Fanatics. So type in the code Fanatics at checkout for the Lawnmower 3.0. You'll get 20% off, and that, of course, is on manscaped.com. So head over there, get your lawnmower, and get all prepped up for draft night, because you don't want to be all hairy for draft night, Bruce. I mean, I know I am. I got to get my Manscaped out before next Thursday and get groomed up to watch, hopefully, the Patriots take a guy that won't lead them into the next era of 20 years of dominance. Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. I got to be honest. When you said that you should make sure that you went nuts with your lawnmower, not only is it a wonderful pun, but in addition, I'm not entirely sure that men's grooming products are a type of thing that I would like to use to describe myself as, quote, going nuts with.
Right.
It just feels like maybe that's a recipe for disaster. I don't know. I don't think I want to go nuts.
I think you're spot on, Bruce, but I think that's the nice thing about the Lawnmower 3.0 is that you can go insane with the thing. And if you're like me, even if you are precise, or so you think you are, you're going to wind up with some nicks. That's the problem. But with this thing, you can be as wild as you want and you're golden. That's why I need it, because my normalcy in that department is a bit erratic probably to most. So that's what I'm getting at here. But I love how I didn't take advantage of that pun opportunity, Bruce. You should have paused me right in the middle and said,
sorry, man.
Damn it, Z-Bot. Golden opportunity, and you struck out. Next time.
You trusted me. I failed you.
Oh, damn it. Bruce, before we wrap the show up, I thought we'd play a little game here called Fill in the Blank, inspired by the NFL draft, because there's a ton of storylines here, and I think a lot of these can have an interesting segment revolved around what goes in the blank for each of these particular categories. So I'm going to start off with number one for you, Bruce. You ready?
I'm ready.
The Jets drafting Zach Wilson is a blank decision.
Reasonable. It's a reasonable decision. I completely understand why people have Zach Wilson as QB2. And I completely understand why Robert Saleh, coming from the 49ers, would want a quarterback that Kyle Shanahan has been trying to get. And that's someone who can make plays off schedule. Someone who would perform well inside the play action zone-based system that is likely coming from San Francisco back, but in addition, be able to do the things that Kyle Shanahan's trying to get a quarterback to do. So it seems reasonable. If that's what I'm trying to achieve, I can look at Zach Wilson and go, yeah, okay, I get it. I see where you're going with this.
I think reasonable is a perfect word there. And honestly, now it's a necessity because Darnold's gone. You have to go quarterback. And it just seems like at this point, they are so invested, at least media speaking, into Zach Wilson. If they don't go that route, the Jets fan base is going to implode. There's a certain PR aspect to that. When your entire fan base is convinced you are taking a particular guy to the point where it's not even arguable at one point or another, you have to go that route. The thing about Zach Wilson to me that has been so confusing throughout this whole thing is just that it was never a topic. Zach Wilson was never discussed at the top tier realm of the draft until the middle of the offseason. That's what's so intriguing to me about this. And he's also got similar qualities to Sam Darnold, where you look at him and he comes out with this label that he could potentially be the best quarterback in the draft, right? And in Sam Darnold, Josh Allen's draft class, Sam Darnold was considered to be the best. And when there's expectations there, especially in New York, and especially when you're going into a situation that might not necessarily be built for your success, there's a lot to prove. And that's what I worry about with Zach Wilson. Is it, one, that much of an upgrade over Sam Darnold? And two, have they done enough, or will they do enough to allow him to succeed? Because they clearly did not with Sam Darnold. All right. Go ahead, Bruce. You got something to say?
No, I'm good, man.
Oh, cool. Number 2, Bruce, the first defensive player off the board will be blank.
Oh, wow. That's a great one. First defensive player off the board will be Patrick Surtain Jr.
Yep.
I think Cowboys. I think it makes sense for them. Patrick Surtain Jr. is one of those players that if you desperately need a corner and you don't really want to take swings at Hail Marys with JC Horn, then you just say, you know what? We're going to take Patrick Surtain. We're going to take it to the bank. We're going to be very, very pleased. It's not just a high floor player. It's also, he's really good right now from a technical standpoint. So when you are in a situation where you really need a corner, the way that the Cowboys really need a corner, you think, do I want to get cute here? Do I want to take a high upside player who I'm going to have to coach around? Or I don't need him next year. I need him now.
Right.
So I don't want to wait 3 years for him to be a good player and develop. I want to be able to plug him in right now, a la Tre'Davious White, and be able to have him walk off the bus as a corner. And if you take all the things that they said about Tre'Davious White coming out, right? Professional, works in a bunch of different techniques, always is where he's supposed to be. If you take all these things from a technique standpoint, you can apply all of them to Patrick Surtain. So for me, that makes sense because it's the safest pick, and we don't have that one dominant, clear-cut edge rusher who's going to go in the top 5 like we do a lot of drafts.
I'm in agreement. Patrick Surtain, to me, is going to be the first one off the board, but that's the Cowboy element of that segues into number 3. At the 10th overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys will draft a player on the blank side of the ball. I'm assuming you think defense.
I do think defense. It was all part of my master plan. Part of my master plan, C-Bot.
You read like a book. Your leather book.
I could see the reflection of the notes in your eyes. That's what it was.
You got more powers than you can do the voice. You can be anonymous. I mean, you're the Dark Knight. I mean, you really are, Bruce. It's unbelievable. I have to say, Bruce, if for some insane reason Kyle Pitts falls down to Dallas, I don't think Jerry Jones can resist.
He absolutely can't resist. Absolutely 100%.
So that's, to me, where that's the only situation where I see the Cowboys going offense, but they're fools if they do anything else, because I mean, that defense is just atrocious. It needs work in almost every area. You got to take a guy like you just said, who can help you out now. And I think Patrick Surtain, or one of the other top level defensive players, does that. The nice thing for Dallas is that it's really looking like the top 9 picks are all going to be offensive players. So they essentially get the pick of the litter when it comes to defense. They really do get the number 1 overall defensive choice should the board fall the way everybody thinks it will. So Cowboys primed to go D, but we know Jerry Jones, he likes his shiny toys, Bruce. If Kyle Pitts shockingly falls to 10, that would be crazy. Okay, this one's my favorite, Bruce. Blank is the quarterback most likely to win Rookie of the Year.
Wow. I'll go with Trevor Lawrence.
Okay.
The reason I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence is because I think that when you look at Urban Meyer and his systems and how they were able to make things easy on a quarterback when he was in college, I don't anticipate him and the offensive coordinator in Jacksonville to make significantly different decisions than Urban made when he was in college in regards to offensive system. And so I do think we'll see a lot of the things that will allow Trevor Lawrence to be successful right now. I think we'll see a lot of RPO game. We'll see a lot of horizontal passing, some jet motion, some things that don't make him be a down the field, full field read passer right away. And because of that, I think there's a real opportunity for Trevor Lawrence to win Rookie of the Year.
I think it's going to be really close. Trevor Lawrence will be right there. To me, I think it's whoever goes to the 49ers, because I think the 49ers right now, out of all the teams built, or out of all the teams in position to draft a quarterback, are the one built for success right now. And because of that, I think that ultimately elevates whichever quarterback they wind up choosing. So I think that quarterback is put at an advantage to succeed. So I think that whoever goes to the 49ers has the best chance, but I'm dying to see Trevor Lawrence in an NFL uniform, Bruce, because we have been built up to believe that he is going to be the greatest of all time. So it's really going to be, something if he doesn't win Rookie of the Year, right? The way he's been touted coming out of college. I mean, I think it would be the expectation at this point that he wins Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I think that there has been a significant buildup with Trevor Lawrence. I do think that the buildup will pacify a little bit because he's going to Jacksonville, and it's a smaller media market. But I do think that the eyes that will be brought upon Jacksonville due to the presence of Urban Meyer might offset the smaller market function. And if he plays well, then obviously that's going to be a big part of it.
Final one, Bruce, before we get into our last little segment here. I could see Brandon Beane trading up for blank.
I could see Brandon Beane trading up for the last edge rusher in the first tier. So whoever he feels like that is, whether that's Azeez Ojulari, whether that's Kwity Paye, I don't think it would be Jalen Phillips because of what he said about medical being a problem. But if Azeez Ojulari or Kwity Paye are there in the mid-20s, that's someone I could see Brandon Beane trading up for because he doesn't want to be faced with the option of Eric Stokes or Jason Oweh at 30th. So for me, I could see him trading up for the last edge rusher in the tier that he believes is the highest.
Love it. The answer for me is no one. I just don't see the Bills. I don't see Brandon Beane going that route this year in the draft. I think they're going into this with a mindset that they're going to see where the chips fall, and they have their guys in mind that are going to wind up being available in that particular set of picks towards the end. And I just don't know if Brandon Beane thinks that going up to get a particular guy is worth it this year after, with the cap suppression and with whether they think they are right now. I just wonder if at 30, he feels confident in being able to find a guy like you and I were talking about that they can build into somebody that maybe down the line we think would be worth way higher than what they get him at. Like I liked what we were talking about earlier because it made a lot of sense. It just seemed like at 30, despite Brandon Beane being super aggressive, it seems like a spot where the Bills can still get a good talent for what they need without having to move up. It just seems like with the offensive heavy draft that we're about to witness, a Bills team that needs defensive help is in a good spot being at 30.
I would agree with that. And this is the line between aggressive and reckless. And when you trade up in the first round, you're giving up good players, your second round pick, your third round pick. When you trade up in the fifth round, you're giving up picks for players that might not make your team. So I do think Brandon Beane's going to trade up. I would doubt he trades up in the first round, but to be honest, last year when we went the entire draft and Brandon Beane didn't trade up, I was absolutely floored. We got to the end of the draft and I'm like, this can't be real. Yeah. Did I just, is this Inception? Am I in someone's dream at this point? Why did Brandon Beane not trade up? So I think maybe we might see some trade ups on day 3 this particular year to get specifically targeted players because the team is deep and because you understand that your 7th round picks might not make the team, but I don't think trading up in the first round is probably as likely.
Agreed completely, Bruce. All right, before we cap it off here, I thought this would be a fun little thing to dive into because the big story outside of American football this week was in European football for the potential formation of a super league. The story broke that 12 of Europe's biggest soccer clubs were going to break away from the norm and form a super league. The idea has since been put on pause since 10 of the 12 teams that were supposed to join it have now backed out. But a short-lived idea to me is still a very intriguing one, Bruce. I thought to myself, what would it be like if the NFL formed a super league? So I figured we'd do our own here real quick before we sign off. 6 teams from the AFC, 6 teams from the NFC. Bruce, who's in your super league?
Okay, so I need to make sure I discuss methodology before I do this, or else you're going to be like, why did Bruce pick these teams?
Give me your reasoning.
I am picking these teams based upon, I believe, organizational stability moving forward, not how winning they were in the past, not whether or not they won a bunch of games in the last 5 years, but based on organizational stability moving forward. Which organizations do I think are good? Good organizations moving forward. In the NFC, I have the Packers, the Rams, the Saints, the Vikings, the Niners, the Bucks. Packers for obvious reasons. Rams, although I disagree with their status on trade your first round picks for players all the time, you can't argue with the results. They've been a playoff team. The Saints have managed to canoodle the salary cap for the last 15 years to make sure that they remain competitive, and Mickey Loomis is a really good cap guy. The Vikings have historically done a really good job of trading down under Rick Spielman to acquire more draft capital, which I think is a good way to make sure that you're sustaining success. The 49ers, as you mentioned, I really like Kyle Shanahan as the head coach. I think they're in a good position there, if they can get some good quarterback play, to be a good organization moving forward. The Buccaneers, Jason Licht was the runner-up for a lot of people's executive of the year behind Brandon Beane last year. And it wasn't just because he got Tom Brady. It was because the team around Tom Brady is pretty darn good too. Yep. So those are my NFC teams.
Pause.
Go ahead.
Bruce, before you get into the AFC, because the alarming thing here immediately was the fact that the Seattle Seahawks were left off. I need your reasoning as to why Seattle didn't make the cut.
I think Pete Carroll's one of the most overrated head coaches of our era.
Okay.
So
you think Russell Wilson will be gone by the time the formation of the Super League occurs?
I do. And the quarterback by itself is not good enough for me. Yes. The Seahawks have been living off of 2 and 3 good drafts that happened a decade ago for a long time. And Pete Carroll is someone who your team wins in spite of him, not necessarily because of him. And I am of the opinion that if he hadn't gotten Russell Wilson in the 3rd, he would have been fired a long time ago. So I think Pete Carroll is a reasonable, that's it, just reasonable coach. That's it. Not a good, not a bad, just reasonable. He has some benefits. I think there are some intangible benefits to Pete Carroll as far as ego managing and that Phil Jackson-ish ability to be able to manage some egos. But I don't think he's an overly good game day coach. I don't necessarily agree with his offensive or defensive philosophies. And for me, that's the reason why the Seattle Seahawks are off.
Well said. Well said. Okay. Let's hear the AFC.
AFC, Chiefs, Ravens, Steelers, Bills, Colts, Cleveland Browns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start with the Chiefs. Obviously, Andy Reid, one of the better head coaches in the NFL over the last 20 years. They have Patrick Mahomes, which is great. That's a nice thing. But even if before they had Patrick Mahomes, they were a good team with Alex Smith because you have a good front office structure and a good head coach. Mm-hmm. The Ravens have managed to be consistently competitive despite at no point having a really good passing offense. I just said earlier in this discussion that passing and stopping the pass are the most correlative things to winning. And the Ravens, the last 2 times they picked a quarterback, neither one of them ended up being elite passers. Right now, I wouldn't say Lamar Jackson's an elite passer. He's a good player. I like Lamar Jackson. I think he's a really good quarterback. Mm-hmm. But Joe Flacco was not an elite passer of the ball. And the fact that they've managed to be successful for a long period of time, despite not having an upper echelon passer, is a testament to the organizational ability to remain competitive. The Steelers have had 3 coaches since 1956. They haven't had a losing season in the entire time Mike Tomlin has been the head coach. Jeremy, the Jets troll, is in the comments section right now talking about how the Steelers are nah. The only reason you're here, Jeremy, is because the Jets fans aren't good enough to be able to produce content that's good enough for you to go over on their YouTube channel. So, moving along, The Bills are here because I do think that under Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, you can say that there's a significant organizational stability associated with the Bills moving forward. One of the discussions that I had with other content creators are, if Josh Allen ended up busting out, do you burn the whole thing down? And my answer was no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because even if Josh Allen had ended up being a bust, you still give Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane another crack at it because they've done so many other things well that I'm not going to let one bust. Even if Josh Allen would have busted out, you still give him another crack at it. And that's a testament to organizational stability. The Colts are very similar to the Ravens in the sense that Phillip Rivers was able to sort of kind of limp along and have a perfectly reasonable year. I think Frank Reich's a good head coach. I like their GM
this year, Bruce. I think they're going to be right there this year.
I really like the Colts structure, and I think that's a team that's really reasonable quarterback play. That's a step above Phillip Rivers from being really competitive. The Bills were a Hail Mary away from losing to the Colts in the first round of the playoffs. This is a good team. And for me, the Cleveland Browns is the last one. I really like where the Cleveland Browns are headed. I thought Kevin Stefanski was a great coach. Andrew Berry, I think, is going to be a heck of a GM. I like the expenditures that they have made specifically and strategically. They're doing things with a plan. And I think the best thing the ownership in Cleveland can do is get the heck out of the way. And I think they figured that out once they hired Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, that, you know what? I'm just not going to meddle with this anymore. I'm just going to kind of walk away from this. And everyone thinks the ownership is incompetent when the franchise is bad. And everyone thinks the owner is competent when the franchise is good. Sometimes it's not ownership. Sometimes they just got lucky with a hire and stayed the hell out of it.
Well, a great example right now would be the Pagulas with the Sabres and the Bills, because they own both. You can't veer one way or the other, because you could say they're bad owners of the Sabres. Can't say they're bad owners of the Bills. So that's a good point, because it doesn't ultimately fall on the owners. Where it falls is where the hirings were made and how they panned out. They've panned out for the Bills. The Sabres, not so much. But that's a good point. I don't know if I made this too easy, Bruce, or you're using that superpower again where you're looking off my eyes like you did earlier, but we have the exact same Super League, except I do have Seattle in over Minnesota. I give Seattle the edge because I give them the edge into the Super League with the assumption that Russell Wilson stays. I still want to believe he winds up staying. And outside of the Bills, Russell Wilson is my favorite player in the NFL. I just absolutely love the guy. And I think he's one of those rare QBs that gives you a chance to win every week, no matter the incompetencies surrounding him. And I think because of that, and because of the weaknesses within the NFC, especially compared to the AFC, when you look at the NFC as a whole, it's tough to leave Seattle out for me because they're always right there. Despite not being able to go the distance since Russell Wilson's first few years, they are always an extremely tough out. They are always in play. And come the end of the season, you're going to have to deal with Seattle at some point in the playoffs. So I put them in over Minnesota. Plus Minnesota, to me right now, I see where your head was at as far as moving forward, but I don't view Minnesota as a threat until I see a leap at the quarterback position that becomes that elite talent, right? Because as we were talking about earlier, that just seems to be the separation between the mediocre teams and the teams that are really starting to rise. So if that winds up going towards, if Minnesota winds up progressing towards that style, I think I could see them emerging kind of like where your mindset was at. But as of right now, it's tough for me to look past Seattle until they move off Russell Wilson. That story in itself has been quiet lately. That was a huge story for the longest time. I'm dying to see how that winds up panning out come next year, because the fact that wound up kind of becoming a story the way it did was kind of fascinating, because Russell Wilson just doesn't seem like that kind of guy that would ever be a part of a story that's somewhat controversial or a story where he wouldn't want to be in Seattle. But that was a huge story for a long time, Bruce. And it's weird we don't talk about it as much now, I think, because the draft is coming up. But it'll be weird to see where he winds up going, if he winds up going anywhere.
I do think that's kind of weird. It's weird to see a relationship between a franchise quarterback and a team go south so quickly. Yeah. And we saw it with Deshaun Watson in Houston. We saw it with the We saw it with other teams, in this case, the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson. And you hope that they can kind of patch that together. You saw it with the Eagles and Carson Wentz, and there was all the things there. And it's just one of those scenarios where as the quarterbacks start to take up a bigger and bigger chunk of your cap, they start to get more and more power. And one of the things that people talk about in regards to coaching is the most important relationship on your team is between the head coach and the best player. And I think that's true in basketball, and in NFL, the most important relationship is between the head coach and the quarterback.
Sure. And
as long as that's okay, then I think you're all right. But I don't think that's okay in a lot of different scenarios. And in Houston, it wasn't okay when it was Bill O'Brien. And by the time they brought somebody in there, Deshaun Watson had already decided he was done.
Right.
So, yeah.
And they lied to him, saying that he would have some sort of say in the head coaching hire. He wound up having zero say. They went behind his back in the hiring process, didn't put him in on it at all. I mean, this is happening a lot now. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, that's a whole other conversation with a similar storyline. Russell Wilson right there. I mean, obviously, of course, the Deshaun Watson story is derailed in a whole different direction, but we're seeing this happen now. The quarterbacks realize the power they hold. They are the franchise. This happened. I've been preaching this for a long time. This happened in the NBA initially, where the star player knows, hey, you either do it the way I see it or I'm moving on. And that mindset trickled right into the NFL at the quarterback position. But the difference between the NBA and the NFL is in the NFL, you need, like you said, the coach and surrounding pieces. In the NBA, you can get it done with incompetent coaching and less than stellar surrounding pieces. So that's why it's way tougher to pull off in the NFL. But I have found that it to be interesting as the years have gone on here and the money for quarterbacks gets higher and higher, that they start wanting to be a bigger part of the organization as a whole and not just a player. Bruce, hour and a half in the books, man, and it felt like 5 seconds. This was a ton of fun. Really appreciate you coming on. Tell everybody about what you got coming this week, because I know you got a loaded schedule of stuff coming out pre-draft.
Yeah, so tomorrow night, I will be live on Locker Room from 7 o'clock until whenever we finish. And we're going to talk about contracts at 30. We're going to talk about edge rushers being able to get one later in the draft. Are there some correlations? Next week on Thursday morning, you will get the full 32-team 7-round mock in the podcast form. And it will already have been released in writing form on BuffaloRumblings.com the day before.
Whammy. Wow.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a thing. And then I'll be live before the draft, and that'll be fun. I'm gonna have Jay Spence the King on. We're gonna be doing some things there. It's gonna be a good time. And then I'm staying up really late. And then the second they make the pick or they trade out or whatever it is, then I'm going to record Friday morning's podcast. So normally Friday morning's podcast drops at 12:01 a.m. However, I might not be done recording it by 12:01 a.m. So it'll be up as soon as I'm done with it after the draft is over. So that's going to be fun. I'm excited about it. I can't thank you enough for having me, Z-Bot. I love the show. I'm a big fan. I love what you guys are doing at Buffalo Fanatics. I have been part of a lot of different sports communities in my life. I've lived all over the country, and I've been able to be a part of many, many markets, local radio markets, all things like that. And there isn't anybody who does it better than Bills Mafia does it. And the fact that there's room for all of us in this scenario is a testament to the Bills fans and how willing they are to consume good content, no matter where it comes from or from whom. So this is an example of that. This is an example of good content coming from you. So I really appreciate you having me on and allowing me the opportunity to talk to you and to talk to your followers. It means a lot to me, man. Love what you guys are doing, and I just really appreciate it.
Bruce, my God, that was, I could cry. That was so beautifully said. And I love the point you just made, because you know what? I don't think we talk about this enough. It's the norm. There is so much Bills content coming out left, right, center, and down every day, nonstop. And it's just normal to us. I don't think any other fan base has that. I don't bother to look, because are there other fan bases, Bruce? I haven't checked. But it really is something. The work you do is incredible. And the fact that it's snowing in New York in April and you got a full slate of stuff coming out pre-draft, it feels like Christmas coming from you, Bruce. So
I appreciate that, man.
Appreciate everything that you do, man. Rumblings is my go-to article read every time I'm sitting down looking to catch up. So the work you guys do is incredible. The whole community, like you mentioned, it's a great thing to be a part of. And I'm glad we get to share it together, and I'm glad I got to have you on. So looking forward to doing it again soon. And to everybody else watching out there, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. You know, we appreciate you guys more than anything. It was a lot of fun. Hope you had fun, too. We will see you next week, Wednesday night, the last show before the draft. Get ready. We're about a week and a few hours away. So get ready for draft time, baby. Until then, I'm signing off. Thanks again to Bruce. Be safe, be well, and as always, go Bills.